The game industry was perfectly poised to be able to capitalize on a pandemic.
I started quarantine with 0 hours. I'm now at 1,500. Please help me.
It's an interesting question what that does to our well-being, to our mental health.
Someone made a world about storming the Capitol.
Oh boy, okay.
People think about gamers as isolated people, but a lot of us are very social creatures. People are really starting to suffer.
On this season of Reset, we've talked a lot about game history, and I have a lot of respect for history teachers, but I have no desire to be one, especially not after 2020. The idea of having to teach a bunch of angsty middle schoolers about the election, the Kanye, the murder hornets, I don't want that job. But when historians look back at 2020, the one unignorable constant that defined it all is gonna be the coronavirus pandemic. To stay safe, everyone suddenly had to stay home. And for a lot of us, that's where we still are, sitting on our couches, interacting with the outside world through our screens. To put it short, 2020 sucked, but not for the video game industry. On this episode of Reset, we're taking a look at what happens to the industry and the culture of gaming when we all have to find a new reality online. And as a preview, it gets weird.
Hello, I am the President of the United States.
The World Health Organization is encouraging people now to play video games amid the coronavirus epidemic.
No matter how you cut it, for the gaming industry, the pandemic was profitable. Consumer spending on video games in the US hit a record high last year. In the third quarter alone, people spent $11.2 billion on games. That's 24% more than the year before.
Everyone realized that what had happened was that they were seeing a bump in revenue that was similar to what they would have usually seen around the holidays, and that hasn't really gone down.
That makes sense. You tell hundreds of millions of people not to leave their homes, and some of them are going to reach for the controller to keep themselves occupied. But where things get interesting is when you look at the timing.
The game industry was kind of perfectly poised to be able to capitalize on a pandemic. We now live in a world where persistent gaming is really common. We have high internet access speeds, really large thresholds for data transfer. Games have excelled at telepresence for a very long time, right? Telepresence is basically the idea that we have to have simultaneous experiences, but we're doing them at great distance from one another. And games have been excelling at that since the birth of text-based online RPGs in the 1980s.
Even before the widespread prevalence of the internet, computers did have a way to talk to each other, if you had the right kind of connection. Institutions like the military and universities used networks to share research. But when they weren't using them for work, people got up to all sorts of other things in these interconnected spaces, including something called a MUD.
MUD is a multi-user dungeon. MUDs were basically text-based RPGs. You would have an avatar that was all described to you via text. There were monsters that you could fight and battle, but also a lot of it was just social, exploratory, puzzle-solving stuff. And that would carry forward into properties like World of Warcraft. People for decades have been doing everything from holding protests to funerals to weddings inside worlds like that. Of that kind of behavior, which we saw happen in a flurry around COVID, has been going on in some of these online environments back into the prior century.
Maybe it's obvious that we'd use games to socialize during COVID, but a lot of us have also used them to help us handle the stress of the pandemic.
It's definitely the case that we see a kind of large-scale natural experiment where we put global populations at different times in their life in different degrees of social isolation. And it's an interesting question what that does to our everyday life, what that does to our well-being, to our mental health.
Sebastian Dieterding is a researcher who studies how games affect people.
We did a large-scale online survey asking exactly this kind of question. How has your gaming changed and why has it changed? And the things that we observed was yes, people play more and longer, and people play more socially.
When researchers asked why, they got the answers you might expect, because people had more free time or they wanted to connect with friends. But they also found out that people were playing games like some people eat comfort food. The survey showed that people were retreating back to games that they played when they were kids, which seemed a little suspect when I first heard it, but then I realized that over the summer, I had a phase when I got really into speedrunning Super Mario Bros. On the OG Nintendo. So yeah, checks out. They also found that people were playing to occupy their minds. If I'm focused on how to nail the corners in Forza, then I might not be thinking about how the world is going to pieces outside.
We have basic psychological needs for certain kinds of experience that work like psychological nutrients. These are experiences of autonomy, feeling like we can affect change in the environment as we would like to see it. And lots of researchers have argued, well, in a time when everyday life thwarts those basic needs, because there is literally nothing we can do about the pandemic, that games are these virtual environments that give us plenty experiences of that kind.
Few games exemplify this kind of appeal better than one that came out right as the world was shutting down. Nintendo's social sim game, Animal Crossing.
You're given a little island, it's your own little piece of property, and you do activities around the island to gain simple currency, and you spend that currency on things to decorate your island or your home. Everything shrank in Animal Crossing. It shrank in COVID and it shrank in that game, and the world was small and bounded, but it was manageable.
And that little game had huge sales. By the end of March, 11 million people had downloaded Animal Crossing. And by the summer, it was the year's second biggest seller, right behind Call of Duty. Players got up to just about everything on those little islands, from hosting late-night talk shows
Tonight, join Gary and his guests, Brie Larson,
to recreating movies frame by frame.
Everyone was just trying to anesthetize themselves. You had to be somewhere else, even though you couldn't leave your house.
COVID may have been the most consistent and consistently depressing story of 2020, but it certainly wasn't the only thing in the news. You might remember something about an election.
When you use your power, the power to vote will change the course of this country and the course of history.
Normally, we don't talk about politics here on Reset. Okay, I've basically talked about politics damn near every episode of this season, but this is different because we wouldn't be here talking about this if the US government had not catastrophically failed in its response to the pandemic, and if a large portion of the people in the US hadn't bought into politically motivated conspiracy theories instead of, science. It didn't have to be like this. Compare that to countries like Japan, where people took things at least a little more seriously. When LA was under lockdown during the summer, arcades in Tokyo were able to open back up. So yeah, honestly, gaming is in this weird situation because of US politics. But the pandemic, and the fact that we're all still here in quarantine, has also forced a shift in some smaller ways, down to individual households where young gamers have had to confront the ultimate big boss, their parents.
It's been a classic part of parental concern that video games exist in some different place, that they're not real or that they're escapist or distractions. And a lot of the concerns that parents have had around games is that they want their kids out in the world doing real things. I think that dichotomy that we sometimes see between children spending time in online worlds versus the quote-unquote real world really became hard to sustain during a time like COVID.
Gaming of any kind has, in the West, always been met by cultural suspicion. And we've seen that in games in the 20th century with a sequence of basically moral panics. So with pen and paper role-playing game, we saw moral panic around Satanism.
Like in D&D, they have witchcraft and stuff like that, which is a part of Satanism too.
We then had the next moral panic that digital games would make us violent.
Violent visual imagery inflicted upon children, particularly the video games.
But the claim that video games lead to aggression, particularly real-world violence, is largely debunked. Now today, after aggression, we see the newest moral panic around games and digital media in general and addiction. So we're very afraid that games, apps, websites are designed in order to addict us, and this massive amount of time that we then spend on screens, on games, has negative impacts on our mental health.
If kids are being asked to suddenly go to school on their computers, you can't make a claim that the time they spend in video games is any less real than that anymore. What we saw was a lot of people turning to games to reinvigorate their social networks, and that these are well-developed and extremely viable forms of social contact. And the pandemic certainly underscored that.
Coming up, I check out how the real world shutting down has led to more virtual worlds popping up.
I feel like I should give some sort of disclaimer. These places are like really fucking weird.
We're back. So usually this is the part of the episode where I get up off my chair, go out into the real world and play some video games in person. But the whole problem with the pandemic is I can't just go out into the real world anymore. So instead, I'm gonna sit right here and check out some of the other worlds that people have been living in. And I thought I'd start off with an old friend. I first met Simmer a couple years ago, and he's a legit celebrity in virtual reality. So I thought if I want to know what's happening with COVID and virtual worlds, I should start with him. Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Simmer's made a name for himself posting videos on YouTube where he interviews people in a virtual chat platform called VR Chat. His anonymous guest avatars might be a little goofy looking, but the topics are serious. People have reached out to him to talk about everything from school bullying to PTSD in the military.
Just my general outlook significantly changed. I was just very antagonistic, kind of like I was like a wounded animal, like lashing out. It's just, you feel hemmed in.
When we last talked, I think VR chat was something that people were doing kind of as a hobby, but since quarantine has started, how have you seen VR chat change?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more full-time players, I guess. There was always a small group of people that had their entire social circle exist in VR, but that has definitely, you know, been accelerated.
I asked Simmer to show me some of the newer spots that have popped up in the virtual world since lockdown.
Can you take me to some places that are interesting?
Yeah, there's like lots of surreal stuff. I mean, there's the Four Seasons world. Have you seen it?
I have not seen the Four Seasons world, no. Can we go take a look?
Okay, yeah, we can go there. The description of the world is a great place for a press conference.
All right.
Hello, I am the President of the United States.
In case it's not immediately obvious, this is a virtual recreation of the landscaping company, where Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, gave a press conference denouncing the results of the election. It went viral when a bunch of furries had a meetup there. Very 2020.
Oh, I guess we could go to a VR nightclub, you know, if you wanted to show what people are doing in VR during the pandemic. We could go, like, watch people try to hook up with each other.
Oh, shoot, really? Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, here we go. I feel like I should give some sort of disclaimer. These places are, like, really fucking weird.
You got all your staples here. You have your cat girl imagery.
You have these two people here laying on top of each other in VR. I'm sorry, don't let us interrupt. Yeah. I'm just showing my friend here around VR chat.
Welcome to VR chat.
Thank you.
Take him to the FPT heaven.
To the what?
The where?
FPT heaven, full body tracking heaven. Search up for FPT.
It's a nice dancing place, you know?
Let's go see what the deeper of this world looks like.
Oh wait, are you a YouTuber? If you're the person I think you are, I love your videos. You got me into here.
Thank you for your kind words.
Wow. So have you found yourself coming here more since quarantine?
Boy, right now, look. I started quarantine with 0 hours. I'm now at 1,500. Please help me.
Whoa.
We have like the same amount of hours and I do this for a living.
I just kind of chill with people, you know? That's what I do now.
Has this become part of the social life then since quarantine?
Of course. It's the only way to see anyone.
If you tell somebody, hey, there's a bunch of people hanging out and some of their best friends are on VR chat, they just said, oh yeah, that's a bunch of weird computer nerds. Now though, so much of everybody's life has gone online. Do you think that's legitimized being in virtual reality more?
I think there's a lot more people that consider online social interactions legitimate than there were before. I think if you polled like a bunch of people under 30 and asked them, are your internet friends as real as your real life friends? The vast majority would say yes.
So your videos, especially recently, they're pretty heavy.
Yeah, you know, it's not my fault. I don't have as many people who want to talk to me about happy things in their life.
What's your inbox look like nowadays?
Either an email or a social media DM every 3 to 4 minutes.
Are you serious?
Yeah, there is a lot.
What are you finding people want to talk to you about?
There's a lot of people who want to talk about general depression. Not necessarily something that's like a specific life event, but just their whole life feels kind of bleak to them. That's definitely a common one. There's lots of depressed people, and that sucks.
This may be just one VR celebrity's anecdotal experience, but it actually checks out.
It's going to get worse.
During the pandemic, people have been hurting, and it's been much harder to get access to help. According to the CDC, the number of US adults struggling with anxiety and depression tripled in 2020. And a recent WHO report revealed that 67% of people in counseling or therapy have experienced disruptions to their care. Some people have turned to therapy apps for some kind of relief. For those in the gaming community, there's Dr. K.
Anytime you face a challenge in life, you've got to be careful that you don't kick yourself while you're down.
Dr. Alok Kanoja, or Dr. K to his fans, is a psychiatrist and professor at Harvard Medical School. He also streams on Twitch and heads an organization called Healthy Gamer, which has been pretty busy during lockdown.
So when quarantine starts, you put out a tweet asking how people were doing. I'm curious to know how that went.
You know, actually, I think the gaming community started off actually pretty good. The cool thing about the gaming community is that we have significant social connections through virtual relationships. So in a sense, for a lot of people in our community, it's actually kind of sad, but quarantine didn't affect their life too much.
What do you think when you see that, though, as a psychiatrist?
I think it's sad, man. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's part of what holds our community back. I'm all for playing video games, but in a healthy way that doesn't negatively impact your life. And I think the real challenge that we face now is that a lot of people, as we try to support them, we're running into an interesting problem because they don't have the opportunity to, like, once we sort of help them with their video game addiction, they don't have the opportunity to go out and do other stuff. So it's kind of unfortunate because people can't get better in a weird way during COVID. People think about gamers as like isolated people, but a lot of us are very social creatures. And so I think things like shutting down things like esports, no longer having things like conferences, that's been pretty impactful. People are getting more depressed. Suicidality is also on the rise. And so I think that people are really starting to suffer.
Do you find yourself relating to gamers in a particular way that you may not speak to a non-gamer?
Absolutely, man, because I think gamers, so like, just think about this for a second, okay, Dexter? Like, if you play a game, you kill a monster, you get 10 gold, you get 10 XP. Your brain starts to really think about certain rewards. And so what we see is that gamers struggle because when they do move out into the real world, it's like doubly painful because they're so used to certainty. You know, at the end of the day, life is RNG. Everything is randomized. And the more that you begin to accept that it's all fucking RNG, like, the better you're going to be able to move forward in life, because then you won't have expectations. And if you don't have expectations, you won't have disappointments.
Have you found that the pandemic has made people want to take things more seriously on your stream?
I think people are getting more serious in our community, for sure. And I think what gets people serious on the stream, Dexter, is when people say, oh my God, I feel like he's talking to me.
Ooh.
And so the you know, my favorite comment on Twitch chat is, I feel personally attacked. And that's what we're there to do, right? We're there to bring light to all of these dark places.
People are a lot more compassionate than you give them credit for. And if you turn to them for support, you will find people that will help you out.
Coming up, the Reset Roundtable, where we break down the good, the bad, and the weird of gaming under COVID. We're back, and it's time to break it down with the Reset Roundtable. Join me this time are Motherboard staff writer Gita Jackson and the host of Waypoint Radio, Austin Walker.
Good to be here.
So we are seated very far away from each other for a very specific reason, and that is because quarantine's still going on.
This is it. This is the closest I've been to people who are not my roommate in months.
There have been some studies done on what kind of games people are playing during quarantine. And one thing that I found really interesting is that a lot of people are going back to the games they were playing in childhood. Did y'all find yourself gravitating toward certain kinds of games
I did end up replaying most of a game that came out, I would say like 9 years ago, called Dragon's Dogma. It's like a fantasy open world action thing from Capcom. One quest is like, I lost my snakeskin purse. It's somewhere in the river. And the river is very long, and this is like a notorious quest for people who like this game. And I was like, I cannot wait to go look for that snakeskin purse for 3 hours and not find it. Because it's just like, it was that familiarity.
Yeah.
It's something to be frustrated at that is not, I need to put on a mask to go get groceries.
You know, when everyone was just kind of like playing video games 12 hours a day, I was like, I no longer know when this is an unhealthy behavior.
Most mental health care is done in office, with somebody lying on the couch. If you are somebody who plays a lot of video games, especially right now, you're used to interacting with people online. So I imagine actually there will be a whole lot of people who are very open to the idea of having somebody help them over an internet connection.
Right.
The one benefit I think of being a person who works in psychiatry or therapy that is familiar with the internet is like, as Dr. K does, getting on Twitch and just talking about his own profession has a huge amount of utility. I mean, we're all in the Black community here. For most of my life, my Black father has called therapy my appointment. He's always got to drop me off at my appointment. How's your appointment? Good one? Okay, let's talk about it later.
Right, yeah.
Being able to, in the same way that television does, bring issues into your home.
And I think it's not just therapy and mental health. We've seen this with something like the Among Us streams that AOC did this year, where there's almost an admission, like, yes, of course, politics is happening in the realm of video games.
Yeah.
Instead of ignoring it or saying like, okay, yeah, but that might happen, but we don't need to be involved in it, you saw politicians, especially politicians on the left, say, how do we get involved in that space?
This is an interesting room. There's a shower stall and a DJ booth.
Even though he, like a boomer, he got there mad late, like Joe Biden was the only one to offer campaign materials in Animal Crossing. He paid attention to where his voters would be. They would be playing Animal Crossing. AOC, she went to where her constituents are, where they currently are located. They are located on Twitch.
That is all the time we got for this one. Gita, Austin, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
And you, thanks so much for coming through again. There's more to come on Reset, the unauthorized guide to video games. See y'all next time.